Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the recording of the annual Public Sector Catering Most Influential Roundtable debate. The Public Sector Catering Most Influential list is compiled at the end of every year to reflect the individuals who the panel feel have had most impact on the service over the preceding 12 months. This year's list comprises of leading industry caterers, both in-house and outsourced, heads of the major industry associations, key sector influencers, and suppliers. Every year, the group meet at the House of Commons to discuss the big issues that have affected the service over the year and what is likely to have an impact in 2021. Unfortunately, we were unable to meet this year because of the pandemic, but most were able to join us for a virtual meeting on December the 10th, and this is a recording of that meeting. The PSCMI list, product of the PSC 100 group. We would be unable to do these things, the many webinars we run, and in normal time, the live events, without the support of the group's partners who are listed here. We thank them for their support of both us and the industry generally. The UK supply chain has been exceptional during the last year in such awful circumstances. Now I will pass over to David Fode, Group Editor of Public Sector Catering, who will be chairing the meeting and posing the questions.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Andrew, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this roundtable of the top 20 most influential people in public sector catering. Just to give you a little bit of background, some of you will be familiar with this, others less so. Every year since 2009, we've been doing this, convening a panel of industry experts and asking them to draw up a list of the men and women who stand out for the power they wield in this particular part of the industry. They might be the head of an industry association, could run a contract catering company with significant contracts in the public sector, could be a political or medical figure. They could have authored a valuable report or done some research. They could be a social influencer, or they could be lending their insight to government bodies, or they could be inspiring the next generations of catering hospitality workers through education and mentorship. Influence obviously comes in many forms, and I'm pleased to say they're pretty much all represented here today. So please accept my congratulations on making the 2020 list. Now I've got a request of you. I'd like to tap your knowledge and expertise, hear your opinions about some of the major issues that confront the world of public sector catering as we head towards the new year. I hope this exchange of opinions can help to highlight perhaps how sharing your thoughts and ideas today might point towards some useful ways of collaborating in 2021. In fact, that's been the lesson of the last 11 years for me, how by supporting each other and pooling your respective strengths and resources across the public sector, you're best able to represent the industry to governments and to the wider industry. So let's make a start by doing a quick round to introduce ourselves. It might help if we just sort of work on the basis of the view that I've got here. So I'll just call your name, and if you just sort of briefly say who you are, who you're representing. I know that one or two of you here today are not part of the official top 20, but you are representing someone who is. So Andy Jones, can we start with you, please?
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andy Jones. I'm the chair of the PSC 100 group, and proud of that, and love to represent you all.
Thank you very much. Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Foster, chair of LASA, the School of Food People, and pleased to be here today. Thank you for asking us, David.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Kathy.
Sorry, phase of the month, yeah, I was on mute. Hi, I'm Kathy Amos. I'm head of customer marketing at Brakes and delighted to represent Brakes once again on the PS 100. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, Clive.
Good morning, everyone. So Clive Dunlop, I represent the Ministry of Defence. I'm the policy lead for catering services. Over to you.
Thank you. Craig?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Craig Smith. I'm the National Chair of the Hospital Caterers Association. So looking forward to a good debate.
Good morning. Sean, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all safe and well. Sean Haley, Chairman of Sodexo in the UK and Ireland. It's great to be here. Thank you for the
Very
invitation.
much. And Jane.
Morning everyone, Jane Jones. I am National Chair of Assist FM, which represents school caterers, cleaners and janitorial staff in Scotland.
Lovely. Phil Shelley.
Good morning everyone. Phil Shelley, Chair of the NHS Food Review. Great to be with you.
Okay. Andy Kemp.
I am the Sales and Marketing Director of Bid Food, representing Bid Food and linking back into the Federation of Wholesale Distributors.
Lovely. And good morning, Kath.
Good morning. I'm Kath Dalmeny. I'm Chief Executive of Sustain, which is an alliance of about 100 food and farming organisations, and we work on all things to do with good food. And I am also Chair of the Future British Standards Coalition that David mentioned.
Good morning. Mark Davis.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Mark from ISS. We're a contract caterer. We're serving schools and hospitals and workplaces up and down the UK.
Thanks, Mark, and congratulations on your Katie, by the way.
Thank you.
Good morning, Tess.
Morning, everyone. It's lovely to be with you this morning. I'm Tess, and I'm Sustainable Development Manager here at Quorn Foods.
Great. And Lindsay, can you hear us?
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. My name is Lindsay Graham. I am with the Poverty and Inequality Commission in Scotland and Scottish Government's Social Renewal Advisory Board.
Okay, and Jack.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jack Watts. I'm Agri-Food Delivery Manager for the National Farmers Union. I'm here on behalf of Stuart Roberts, our Deputy President.
Thank you. Sue Cawthray.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sue Cawthray. I'm the National Chair for the National Association of Care Catering, and again, delighted to be with you all this morning.
Lovely. Mark Taylor. He's gone.
Good morning. No, he's definitely not gone. He pushed the wrong button. Good morning, everyone. Mark Taylor, Healthcare Sector Lead at Premier Foods. And like Kathy and some of our other sponsors, absolutely delighted to be continuing with the sponsorship of this very important group of people. So thank you.
Okay. Phil Rhys-Jones.
Good morning and bore da, everybody. Glad to be here. I'm Phil Rhys-Jones. I'm the National Chair of TUCO, the University Caterers Organisation.
Good morning, and we're moving to Lydia.
Hi everyone. I'm Lydia. I'm National Account Manager for a plant-based brand called The Meatless Farm.
Lovely, and we've got Dominique.
Sorry, just coming off mute. Hello, I'm Dominique. I'm representing Alexia from Love British Food. Alexia can't be here today, but I've been working very closely with her on the public sector catering reports that David Fode has requested into local sourcing for the public sector. So we're looking at some of the success stories and the challenges that exist in the catering sector at the moment, and how we can put together some guidelines for anyone looking to do that moving forward. Just to give you a bit of background, my own business is in purchasing software to help caterers overcome the operational barriers to working with local sustainable SMEs. So I've done a lot of work into this kind of area in the private sector before, and I've been really fascinated to speak with a number of you already on how it's working in the public sector. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good morning. And we've got Andrew Pond.
Morning. Andrew from Saffron. So good to join everybody. Sorry I'm a little bit late, but great to be here.
You were a little bit Jane as well for a while, Andrew.
Yes, yeah. I can be mostly at weekends.
Right, let's get cracking then. I think first up, we can't ignore the fact that for sort of 9-10 months of this year, and we've had the large shadow of COVID-19 looming over us. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on what's happened, but more to think about the lessons that we've learned and how they might be applied going forward. Andy Jones, can I start with you on this? The lessons learned, what would you say are the some of the most important ones that we can carry forward into 2021?
For me, I think keeping working as a team. I think what this really does is put all the associations together to sharing ideas for the value of those we serve, whether it's the patients, our clients in care homes, our students, prisoners, MOD. And I think we need to really keep that focus going, share better ideas, let's drive forward together. And I really also want, I've said it on numerous occasions, but the supply chain are integral to that. We've innovated, we've got to keep that innovation going. And we really do need our supply partners to work with us driving forward. It is not going to be easy as we come out the pandemic. We're seeing light at the end of the tunnel as we've seen today. But I think we need to give confidence to our customers and our staff as well. One thing I really am concerned about, we really do need to work going forward, is the retention of staff in the hospitality industry and keeping them in the hospitality industry, because I think they're listening to negative press out there and that could impact us on us all. So that's a conversation I think we really do need to have going forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm just been reminded that although we can't see her, Molly Shah from PACE, Professional Association of Catering and Education, is very much with us in audio only. Molly, perhaps you can come in on this particular point, because there must be some concerns for you about the future workforce coming into catering and hospitality. Perhaps some of the impressions they've had over the last 9 months or so with what's happened in that particular sector as a result of COVID might be putting people off. Is that the case? She's gone. Okay. Apparently she's gone. All right. Hopefully we can be joined by her later. I probably didn't make this clear enough at the start, but there's obviously a big group of you here today. I've got a bit of an idea of who might be best answering one or two of the questions that we've got, but please feel free, if you've got a point you'd like to make on this or any of the other discussion points that we've got, if you could just indicate in some way, you could pop something into chat, or you could just sort of raise a hand or something like that, and I'll try and get to you as much as we can. Sean, perhaps I could ask you for some input from your perspective on lessons from 2020 on COVID and the ones that we can sort of take forward next year.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I think it has been a year of real learning. I think we've had significant learning as individuals, but also as an industry throughout this year. A couple of call outs from me would be the fact, I think within the context of this discussion, food has never been more important to everybody. So wherever you sit, however you've experienced the crisis, the pandemic, food has been critical. Our well-being, mental health, physical health, all fueled by food has been so important. And I think that gives us a great platform to go forward. I think just going back to Andy's point, the crisis has shown that we can work collaboratively, quickly, at pace, in a very, very complex industry. And I think we should all take responsibility for making sure we take that forward into the future, because I think it will be expected from us. It's a complex industry we work within. Many things have to join up to make it successful, but we've proved throughout the crisis, I think, to a good degree, we can do that, and we should be proud of that. And I think the final point I would make, and again, definitely relevant to this discussion, we've spent many, many years talking about the private sector and public sector working together. Can they work together? Can't they work together? Can we actually deliver value to our consumers? Well, I think COVID again has allowed us the opportunity to prove that we can. The combination of public, private and third sector really has stood up and delivered when it needed to. And I think there's great learning in that we can take forward, because at the end of the day, if we're going to deliver increased value going forward, we have to do it together. So they're just a few thoughts from me. David, I don't know if they resonate with others, but...
Okay, well, thank you very much. Kath, I know you sort of posted a quick little comment in chat. Could you just sort of expand on that a little bit for us?
Yes, so the comment I put in the chat is that for me, COVID has demonstrated the really massive role of local authorities, public sector institutions, and wonderful, marvellous caterers in supporting people to have access to their basic necessities, such as food. But it also struck me that government was not properly aware of that, especially early on in COVID. And it took a lot of arguing and shouting by lots of you guys and lots of our colleagues to try and get government to remember that. Because unfortunately, the response was often to give large amounts of money to one or two companies to try and solve it from the top, rather than saying, actually, there's this wealth of amazing talent and energy and wonderful creativity that could have been harnessed. For example, making Meals on Wheels services much more available and making sure that they are embedded into policy and funding at a local and national level. Local authorities had to argue for money in order to be able to do the boxes to people who were vulnerable, for example, and I was very much involved with some of the meetings with DEFRA during that time. Lots of wonderful individuals trying to respond, but no real sense of this amazingly creative, wonderful industry who was ready and available and willing to do the work.
Okay, thank you. Jane, you're nodding along there. Is that been very much the same in Scotland, or is the picture slightly different there?
Yeah, I recognise exactly what Kath has described there. However, I think our context is slightly different, where a lot of that support was certainly channelled through local authorities for delivery, which made a significant difference because we were able to react and get the right resources into the right places at the right time. I think a big part of it for us was the importance of our communities. That's probably the only thing that's really not been said, and it's been the community response and the partnership working between business, supply chain, caterers and communities in Scotland that have made a huge difference. But for me as well, it's also been a stark reminder of our resilience, our innovation and our creativity, and the ability of frontline caterers to just get the job done and get food to those who need it most, whether they are pupils or whether they are elsewhere in the community and are vulnerable for a whole number of reasons.
Thank you. Lindsay, I can see you've been busy in chat too. Do you care to sort of share some of those thoughts with us?
I would agree with Kath there in that I think the pandemic, we weren't ready for it. Our communities weren't pandemic proofed. And there was something about community resilience planning where food really wasn't a priority. You looked at local authority plans and you saw Red Cross will provide parcels for 3 days, so there's a bit more about community planning. And one thing I did see an awful lot of right across the country was community activism. People were stepping in. The local authorities were ready, but they just didn't get the money down in time, I don't think. And what I was startled was the amount of money that was made available when the need was there. The magic money tree suddenly appeared, and so money went down to lots of different places. Some of them a little bit dubious as far as I'm concerned. But we also saw a lot of research. We've seen a lot more research in the last 9 months. My goodness, we have a vaccine going out today. I mean, how amazing is that? And I think the public awareness of food has grown massively. Sean's point there about food being more important. I don't think I've ever, in 20 years of working in food, seen it being so highlighted in the media as it has been. Some in not such a good way, where we saw the supermarket shelves stripped and people going without, and in other ways we saw such compassion and kindness and amazing work being done by statutory, third sector, philanthropy, all sorts of things. So it's been a terrible year for food, but it's also been an inspiring and humbling one too.
Thank you. Craig, can I bring you in here? I'm trying to get a bit of a sense of how what we have learned over this last year is now being pulled together in the form of sort of contingency plans that we could use for a future COVID type situation, or perhaps something similar. Is that sort of work going on that you're aware of?
I think that we're still, we have got the vaccine out today, and that is absolutely fabulous news. But we can't sort of get out the champagne glasses too much yet, because we're still in the thick of it, and it hasn't gone away. but it's perfectly right. We haven't had a wash up or a post-mortem on what was good and the lessons learned, but they certainly will be. But I think that already, just sort of from my own point of view of going around the country with the various HCA branches, there is already an increasing maturity of our response at a drop of a hat to be able to meet the challenges full on and not to just simply stand there like the rabbit in the spotlight. You know, we do have a lot of resources which we can now swing into action as and when it's needed, and that isn't just in sort of acute hospitals where we have a high concentration, but it's actually getting out into the communities as well, and that's where we link up with all of our other colleagues, reaching out to the most vulnerable, and they're the ones who don't have any great support wrapped around them immediately.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to move things along. You'll obviously all be aware that we've got fairly limited time today, and move on to Brexit. Obviously, there's been so much in the news about the sort of the uncertainty of what's ahead. But I wonder, Andy Kemp, from your sort of perspective and insight that you've got, we were in earlier times worried about potential food shortages. Is that still something that is a concern, deal or no deal? Andy, you're muted at the moment.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I think it does remain a concern for us within wholesale and particularly for the smaller wholesalers, because the larger players can afford to buy in stock, hold that stock, put forward contracts. But I think what people haven't recognised is that post-COVID, I think from the FWD membership, 42% of the wholesalers within the UK believe that they will be going into receivership within the next 3 months. So it is a huge amount, and this is frightening, driven by the fact they have had little or no support from government. You know, and you'll know that I've been on record with the BBC, the government, and so on and so forth, arguing for things such as rates relief or tax relief on trucks, etc. So I believe that this is an issue. I also believe that we have a major confusion around the tariff situation, which is going to add costs, particularly if you're operating an organisation that's trading in Northern Ireland and is shipping out of the UK. For example, you'll pay your tariff into the UK. When you ship it, you pay it again as it goes into Northern Ireland. So you could be paying 20% twice. So some of these things are still sitting in the background. I believe that we'll be okay with the majority of dry and wet goods. I do believe that frozen will be okay because people have got fairly good stock. There's a real issue sitting around fresh, and there's a real issue about anything that's coming in from Europe in the immediacy because of the concerns of getting through ports. The FWD and distributors are still trying to get the green lane agreement, which means that if you are on a green lane, it's a fast track in the same way as medical will be. And we believe that with the supply of hospitals, schools, prisons, etc., that we would need that green track, but it's yet to be agreed.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, perhaps you could give us a bit of a school's perspective on this. Is there concern among your members about potential price rises for food, especially fresh food?
Yeah, absolutely, David. I think we had our first Brexit forum last week, which was a mixture of caterers and leading partners from our supply chain. And I think that sort of it's almost that we're facing the unknown. And I think that Andy's point about, not having sort of any information, particularly around tariffs, is alarming for us. In schools, we sort of work to a very price sensitive marketplace. And, sort of a penny on food costs is a huge amount for us in terms of our caterers. And I guess that across public sector, generally, that's the case. But in schools particularly, it's really acute. And I think I would sort of put that alongside the sort of the the government's position, particularly around sort of the comprehensive spending review and public sort of spending at the minute, that whilst we've been lobbying for an increase in universal infant preschool meal rate, Boris was very keen to claim ownership of the policy back in June, which was great. And they did give us an inflationary increase, but unfortunately, it was only for 1 year, and therefore it was 4p. That's great because it actually cemented the policy for us in terms of infant preschool meals, and it really gives us the grounding for extending preschool meals to more children. I think that the other challenge, of course, is that we're seeing more and more preschool meal children coming to the fore, and therefore supply is going to be ever more important to us, that we can actually feed those preschool meal children on a daily basis. And it's the fresh items that are really important to us. Many of our kids have lived on sandwiches for 6 or 9 months this year. And, you know, we're really keen to get them back to having a hot, balanced meal on a daily basis. If we're set the two challenges of tackling obesity and making sure that we're giving children, you know, sort of the right foods to help with that obesity piece. And then if we overlay that with the financial challenge that potentially we face but can't quantify at this stage, it could be a crisis that hits us early next year.
Okay, thank you. Mark Davis, can I bring you in? Can you give us some idea of what contingency planning you've put in to deal with, you know, potential price rises or food shortages?
Yeah, sure. Just before that, I've just been really enjoying the chat from the previous conversation, and you know, I certainly feel like we could take a leaf out of Scotland's book in terms of bringing the industry together and having a stronger voice, because certainly we felt that as individual sectors, we've probably done an awful lot of punching above our weight, but we just want to make sure that that continues, because you know, through the last 5 years of austerity, we've all probably really suffered under the weight of that focus on cost. But of course, the last 9 months has really emphasized the value of what we do in each of the different sectors that we do it. So it's really important that we keep that message going, and that we don't dilute, but we actually enhance the service that we're all delivering into the future. And so coming off the back of, you know, austerity and then COVID to now face Brexit is, you know, we just roll with the punches now. I think we're just used to it, crisis on crisis. So yeah, we've obviously got the prep that we did back in March 2019, that sort of ready, and Andy and the guys at Bid Food, who are our supplier, have been really helpful in RAG rating products, our fresh meat, fresh produce. They've also done exactly the same. So we are working through line by line, product by product, looking at the risk associated with the purchase of those products, both in terms of availability and potential tariff, and looking at what we can do to mitigate the impact of that. From a service point of view, we think we will find a way of making sure that we will have a service to perform. I think my biggest concern at this stage is the engagement with our customers, and saying to them, you know, having us banging onto them about cost recovery and PPN02 and PPN04 and second wave and bubble closures and all that stuff, to then write them a letter saying, oh, by the way, we're about to experience a whole load of food inflation and we might be coming to you for some support on that. We have to be at a place where the government really recognise the value that we do as a collective, because when these things hit, if there isn't the support, I do worry about small and medium-sized caterers having gone through the battles that they've gone through, to then face a Brexit, a hard Brexit with potential significant food inflation on top of everything else. It's going to be really tough to see it through. So yeah, it is a worry. It is a worry. We're ready. I'm less worried about availability right now. I think we'll find a way. What concerns me in a particularly no deal scenario is the impact on food inflation, and therefore on prices, and therefore on the public purse.
Okay, thank you for that. Kathy, from a supplier's perspective, how do you see the the situation going into the new year in terms of supply availability and prices. And perhaps you might have something to say about Jane's concern about the sort of perhaps the small rural communities, schools and such like that are right at the end of these supply chains.
I mean, I think I would sort of agree with many of the things that Andy said earlier on that we've all been planning and then not planning and planning and planning and planning again for this, still with the uncertainty of what this is going to look like as far as the tariffs are concerned, which is it's just such a big problem for people. And I think it's that time scale issues. I'm not concerned on the sort of frozen and grocery side of it, but I would wholeheartedly agree of anything coming into the country that's chilled, and actually for many businesses that's maybe exporting, then yeah, there are concerns and the delays, and I think the product gets in, then the distributors will get it round to people. And I think whether you're a small school or a big school, you will get the product, providing your distributor gets it. And I don't know, we be excluded just because they're a smaller kitchen, for example, but it is about getting the product in, and I think that is what the concern is for everybody, as far as that's concerned. Everyone's working so hard. It isn't as if anybody isn't trying their damnedest. We are just up against it because we need decisions made on tariffs.
Okay, thank you. Jack, can I bring you in for a perspective from the sort of the farming community? Obviously, we do have to import a certain amount of food, and we just can't produce what we need immediately. What's the situation in terms of British produce and what we can supply?
Okay, so I think there's this huge ambition into the long run, but that's clouded by this huge wave of uncertainty that we've got in front of us at the moment. If I think of the capacity and the opportunity we have to produce more fresh produce, I think that's incredible. That's very long term. I think you know, we've had, from a weather point of view, you know, a fairly challenging moment through this growing season. That's impacted things, but this huge amount of disruption, COVID disruption, has really hampered the resilience of farmers and indeed the supply chain. And I think and I really do support the collaboration piece, because I don't think anyone could have nobody could have withstood the impacts of what we've been through in the last 9 months without collaborating with supply chain partners to be able to do that. So imminently, I think you know, things are okay, but what the impacts of the trading environment, and you know, that's not, you know, across the supply chain, resilience has been hit, and it's been hit quite hard. And I think you know, people feel a little bit vulnerable in terms of, okay, well, I have from an end of transition, but then from a domestic support regime, we simply don't know what that's going to be. We know how quickly the money's going to be taken away. What we don't know is what that's going to be replaced with, and what that means to produce food that the market wants at a price point.
Okay, thank you. There's a little bit on the chat about the importance of collaboration. Andy Jones, can you sort of give us some idea of what that sort of collaboration might look like if the industry felt strongly enough that it needed to do something together?
Yeah, David, it's a very interesting chat, and I think Kath's really summed it up really nicely in the chat. The government don't seem to focus on food service; they're up on the retail, and rightly so, because you know that impacts on the wider nation. But of course, we're dealing with the most vulnerable in society. We're also dealing with prisoners and the MOD who rely on great nourishing food. I'm pragmatic. I actually think there may be a deal. I think that Boris is going over to Europe later this week, and he will strike some sort of deal. That's my hopeful. And you know, people around this group know that I'm very much in the Remain group, and never thought I'd say that, but I really do think it is. But if he doesn't, absolutely concur with everything that's said. I think Mark Davis really summed it up well. We are going to really have long-term impact, not short-term, but long-term. Prices will rise. That will impact on our service users. You know, we're just coming out of this pandemic. You know, talk about roll with the punches. We've really been punched hard in the public sector. because of what we deliver to the most vulnerable in society. So for me, I think what we've got to do, David, is write a joint letter to government very quickly, get all the chairs to co-sign it, and Sustain and everybody on this call, and sort of say food service sector is here. We're working with our supply partners. They're raising concerns. If they've got concerns, we're really got to raise this as a voice together. And I think that is really something we do need to get across very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Sean, you dropped a note in about the importance of collaboration too. Is that pretty much the way you see things, the collaboration working?
Well, we've no choice. If we can't collaborate across our customers and into the supply chain, then we will not manage this successfully. It's as simple as that. I mean, you know, the last thing business ever needs is uncertainty, and we've got uncertainty. And Mark was right earlier, you know, I think we've got crisis fatigue. You know, we need all our people to step up again to manage the next crisis. And whilst we've learned a considerable amount throughout COVID that we need to take forward, as I said earlier, that will help us, you know, we're going to need everybody to step up again. Listening to Kathy there from Breaks, you know, the work we've done with Kathy and her team to make sure we are as prepared as we possibly can be. You know, this all adds significant cost into the business and ultimately distracts you from maybe the things you should be doing. But we continue to plan. But at the end of the day, it'll be collaboration and our people, our great people, stepping up again to manage us through the next challenge we have, which happens to be the exit.
Okay, thank you. Kath, can I turn to you now? You made a point about food service seems to be sometimes a little bit neglected in favour of the government talking to retail and seeing that as the most important part of things. Why do you feel that?
Well, I think there's some very practical reasons that there was a group of big business that met with government to plan for no deal during that period when we were talking about Yellowhammer, not the bird, but the contingency planning documents, the worst case scenario and reasonable worst case scenario planning stuff that was going on twice in 2019. As you'll remember, we were going to leave twice and now we're leaving for good, or for bad. So that set of people that was coming together regularly is the big supermarkets and a few food service relevant people. And also I think Fair Share joins in with that as well, because obviously there was a concern about impact on people on extremely low incomes and very vulnerable. So I think it's a habit of history that set of people has continued to be the ones that government listens to and are called in to comment on anything to do with tariffs, food supply, Kent car parks and trucks, you know, which kind of trucks need to get through, what's a priority and things. So I think it's not just cronyism. I think it's habit that the food service hasn't been getting in there and hasn't been able to make its case because there aren't sort of natural friendships and connections. So it's not a conspiracy, it's a habit. And I think we have to break that habit because the food service industry is so gigantically important and has been so impacted. And as everybody has been saying, is serving some of the most vulnerable people in the UK. And of course, is being asked to pick up the tab for all of that fallout, as Lindsay's been pointing out in the chat as well, about people who are really in destitution over this during this COVID, and lots of people losing jobs, lots of parents really struggling to feed their children, lots of elderly people stuck at home. Now the shielding program has finished. You know, a great idea to have a shielding program, but now people are stuck at home without Meals on Wheels services, for example. So the crisis for them is continuing. They can't afford to have crisis fatigue because there are people who are elderly and disabled who can't access food every day of the week. So for me, I feel deeply political about all of this now. Vulnerability and hunger has come to the fore, as it should have done, but that vulnerability and hunger is experienced not just during COVID, it's experienced all the time by some people and at a greater rate. So we have to be political in making sure that you guys, your voices are heard in those places. And I'm afraid to say really quite loudly now, and not to be part of Project Fear or anything. This is about Project, how do we want to be as a society now? Who do we want to be looking after? Where does that money come from? And get really serious about local authority budgets for Meals on Wheels services, for example. Sorry, Meals on Wheels is a bit of an obsession of mine at the moment. We're working with lots of lovely colleagues on this call to try and ramp up a Meals on Wheels campaign. But I think campaigns should be happening because that's the way things get noticed. The only stuff that's got noticed over the last year is when people have really shouted and coordinated to shout, and then money flowed in the direction of the things that got shouted for. It's not a great way to do policy, but if that's what's get listened, you need Daily Mail headlines, you need people to be talking about real cases of how people are suffering, and it is suffering at the moment. So I'm sorry to sound really negative, because in the chat I'm also saying hooray for Scotland all the time, because actually Scotland is looking at joined up policy on these things through the Good Food Nation bill, through working with public sector institutions. I think there's a more, as you can probably tell from my surname, I'm a Scot by heritage, so there is a bit more of a sense that interventionism is you know, a good idea to help people to eat well, to live well. So I am applying for a Scottish passport as soon as we are able, and also saying that we should be getting much more into political mode. And I would be absolutely honoured to work with anybody on this call to make that possible, because I seem to be able to be quite good at making headlines sometimes. So if I can use that skill towards true purpose, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Kath. Sue Cawthray, can I bring you in? We're talking about how to sort of generate a bit of publicity, get sort of marketing and promotion, get a message out there. I mean, you just had a very successful Meals on Wheels week in November. What would be your sort of lessons from that the industry more widely could use if it wanted to sort of start to bang the drum a bit louder?
So whilst you're absolutely right, we had an extremely successful Meals on Wheels week campaign, probably the best Meals on Week campaign that we've had in a very, very long time. It's and I hate, because I'm always extremely optimistic, but that was the week that was, and the only way that we're going to focus on this going forward is to keep banging that drum, because it was a great week. We had a real focus on the Meals on Wheels. There's been lots of pop-up organisations who've really focused on the Meals on Wheels service during the pandemic, and that's fantastic. But there's still no funding. There's still no money coming through to feed all those people that are at home. So what do we do now? And I think that the only way, and you know, with CAF, I'm 100% behind that, because obviously we've got the Meals on Wheels Alliance that we're trying to work on, and we're trying to raise the focus. The only way we're going to do it is collectively and to bang that drum. And I know my colleagues will happily support anything that we can do to really take it forward. And again, you know, just talking a little bit about Brexit. You know, care catering, you know, is so vulnerable at the moment. We've come through the most challenging time all of us have ever worked in, and the care caterers and care homes have come through that crisis, and now potentially we're facing another crisis. And you know, who's going to fund care and catering going forward? Where's the money going to come from? And all we've seen is the money being channeled all over the place. We have to fight together, and again, you're right. You know, we've got some great campaigns going on at the moment, which is fantastic. So let's keep going. We've got no choice.
Thank you. You mentioned funding, and that sort of takes me on to the next topic that I'd like to take up. And I do appreciate that any one of these issues that we're discussing, we could go on for hours about it, but we have to limit them a little bit. So I wanted now to talk about the independent review of NHS hospital food that was reviewed and chaired by Phil Shelley. Phil, we were hoping that there would be some news after your report came out about how it might be funded. What's the story so far?
Yeah, as you probably imagine, anything to do with funding has been very much COVID related. So we were asked to go away and redraft ready for early next year, because we put together a 3-year plan for spending, because the planning behind the review was to not have a one-hit wonder, but to have something over a longer period of time that the government could support. So we've stuck to that 3-year plan. We're rescheduling at the moment to do what we can do right now for the next 3 or 4 months, but then obviously have spending to follow in the early part of next year. So like many schemes that were put forward at the time, it's a waiting game, and we have to appreciate, much as we did when the launch was postponed, sometimes other things come along and you have to show that respect and realize that, sometimes the time is not right.
Okay, thank you. Craig, the review, from your perspective, what happens next? Is it just sort of shelved for the moment, or are your members sort of ready to act on it?
Anything but being shelved. It's still very much a live document, and Phil's right. I mean, events overtake us, and when we did set out on this, we were all buoyed with the promise of additional funds coming in to do various projects and everything else. But that was at a time where we hadn't got round the corner and seen COVID coming straight at us. So we have to be realistic. It would have been nice if we could have sort of launched it with this great fanfare, with a massive investment plan sitting right behind it. But in reality, that just couldn't happen. And if we're talking about starting in earnest next year, what that means now is that in amongst all the turmoil that the hospital caterers are facing with COVID and everything else, it is now the time to start reflecting on digesting the whole document in the first place, and then to be saying, okay, how does this reflect upon me in my individual hospital? And that's really sort of where we want it to get down to, right down to grassroots, and to be saying, this is what I need to improve my service in my particular area and how that will impact. And of course, that was never going to happen overnight. So this is a good opportunity to be actually having a proper look at it before we actually jump in and start scrabbling around to see if I can get my share of the funds. And I know that that's happening. I've already had some correspondence from one of our existing clients who has already started to prepare their gap analysis. And if everybody is around the country is starting to do that, then there's nobody more delighted than myself, because that means that they're really taking this seriously.
Okay, thank you. Phil, if I could just come back to you to briefly on this. One of the things that came out of your report was to set up an expert group that was going to start to oversee how the findings of the report were being rolled out. Is that still happening?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there's a number of people today on the call that, can I just publicly thank really for their support as we came through the report process. I mean, yet again, like we've seen today, it shows a real togetherness. We've all got a lot in common about where we want to be and how we get there. So what we've tried to do so far is that we knew that the money is really important. It's not the be all and end all. It's the bit that needs to follow some of our culture and behavioral changes. So we've continued to drive that importance of personalizing the recommendations. So basically every trust, every chief exec, every chief nurse, every catering manager, and every staff member needs to understand, how can they achieve the core principles of high quality catering throughout the NHS. So the next few weeks we'll pull together the expert group, and this will set out the actions and the timings for the recommendations, and this will enable trusts to measure their current profile against the chief exec checklist, so they can see where they are now. How can they map themselves out to think, well, what can we do quickly? How can we improve our current position, as well as being part of the discussions to create our services that are fit for the future? We realize, and it's fascinating just reading people's comments about, how in a way the public sector feels like we've been left behind. Lots of media around hospitality, and yet it doesn't seem to include the food industry within the public sector. And I agree with the messages that we're sharing together now. We need to be part of that conversation. If we're not, we will never be part of planning to go forward.
All right, thank you. Lindsay, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, it's just that I've been writing down some things as people have been talking, but one of the things that struck me was I was doing a document for COVID recovery, working with the Scottish Government's Social Renewal Board. And one of the comments that came from a sector outside was from people that I thought would know, what is public sector food? And I was quite shocked at that when I thought to myself, people don't understand what public sector food is. People outside there have no idea at all that it means school meals, hospital meals, prison service. You know, they haven't got a clue. So there's something very fundamental for us here in this debate today is how do we get people outside the general public to understand what public sector food is? That was somebody quite high up at an organisation who I really thought would know what public sector food was. The other things, I'm sorry, you're going to get my wish list now. Just very briefly, I'll give you the stuff that I've been writing down. But I definitely think we need to be doing more around public sector resilience planning. So I think there's a message to go to government around that. Destitution has a cost. Hunger has a cost to all our services. People can't access education. The hospitals will be overflowing with malnutrition as well. We also need to be thinking about our producers and providers post-Brexit. You know, that comes in with the NFU. All hail our farmers for keeping us going. I've heard some wonderful stories about producers and providers. So we need to be engaging more and getting government to do an awful lot more around that as well. Community meals. Maybe we need to rebadge public sector food into community meals or something different that people will understand and get behind. You know, I think there's something about how they view public sector meals. It's not got the value that it should have. And yet it's going to be really powerful for a recovery of COVID. We're heading to a depression akin to the 1930s, probably worse. So we need to be thinking about how powerful we are as a collective and what we do about that. The other thing is that public sector, we are front facing, we meet the public. That's something that, you know, that human contact, that's really important, and it's been really important through COVID as well. So we mustn't lose that, how valuable that is when we're actually serving people their food. We've got, so the humanity in that, I think, is really important as well. And then we've got Dame Louise Casey today announcing another blooming campaign for hunger and stuff like that, which it's all very, very muddy. And I definitely think that we're losing something when there's so many campaigns coming out about that. Anyway, that's my rant over.
Thank you very much. We enjoyed it. I guess one of the things that really came out of what Lindsay said there was the sort of the making a joined up approach of food service as sort of part of a sort of a wider way of feeding people. And you might imagine that should be something that's part of the national food strategy. So I wonder then to what extent the public sector has been engaged by the work being done on the national food strategy. Andy Jones, can you sort of come in on this? Andy, you're muted at the moment.
Goodness me, people would love that. I think it's a shame Henry can't join us today being on the top 20, because I think that's some questions that a lot of us would like to ask. I know he's engaged with Phil on the NHS food review, but I think that was post the strategy going out, because this strategy has now been written, and Kath will probably know more than me on this. This strategy's probably been written now probably over 12 months, and with COVID everything got delayed, and we know it's coming out in different parts. I don't believe he's engaged with our industry, our sector, enough, if at all. I had one conversation with Henry, and that was it. And I'm open to all. I'm sure that Andy and Kathy Amos have definitely had conversations from a breaks point of view and a big food point of view. But I think we've been left us out of the main topic of conversation, and that's a shame. And I'm not sure whether the NFU's been involved in conversations. I'm sure they have.
Okay, thank you. Kath, I can see your hand up there.
I'm attending a national food strategy roundtable on public sector food tomorrow. That's quite short-term turnaround, but I've just put my email into the chat to say if people would like to nobble me with anything I should raise there. And maybe one of them is you should be getting together with the industry who delivers this, and I'll be happy to arrange for that to happen, because the team seem to be very bright, very interested in all of these things, quite savvy. Of course, they're not government. We have to remind ourselves that as well. They're an independent review body, so they are making recommendations to government. But what we should be having a strategy towards what should be said in the white paper, which will respond to that national food strategy when it comes out as well. So part 2 of the national food strategy is due out at the beginning of next year in a sort of spring kind of vague kind of way. We're not quite sure exactly when, but it should have a section on public sector food, and it also is part of the economic recovery, social, the social value of that, the fact that it serves people in great need, and all those kind of things are points that need to be made. And I think the team are up for that. And I think they're talking a little bit about tomorrow about how they might, sorry, you'll hear the strains of Groundhog Day, but review government buying standards. We've all been there before, but there may be some work that's been going on that might go on around that. So if there are things that people are concerned about, please see me as a bit of a channel for that, but also don't rely on me. I think you should be making your own noise as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Mark Davis, curious whether from your perspective you've had any interaction at all with the National Food Strategy.
The short answer is yes, I have, but not extensive. I'm not part of any individual group or forum like this. Certainly, I got tapped up for my knowledge around what good procurement was, a bit like that. Yeah, the reintroduction of the balanced scorecard, and I've been banging on about cost over quality for many years. So they picked my brains on my views on what good procurement looks like within the public sector, but nothing more extensive than that.
Okay, thank you. It does seem that perhaps we haven't, as a sector, had maybe as much input into the National Food Strategy as we might have done. Is that your feeling as well, Andy Kemp?
It is. I think that we have to recognise, first of all, is that government does not have an understanding of the food industry at all, in my opinion. And, when you look at the whole dynamic of hospitality and the way that we are controlled quite heavily and correctly so in both allergens and the various management of food, our world is much more complex than being Sainsbury's and throwing it on a shelf. And I, like most people around this table, will have been horrified by looking at major retailers giving back billions plus from the cash they got back. And yet we're sitting here with Marcus and everybody else fighting for cash, and no one's actually even looked to move that forward. I think the National Food Strategy has the good elements around high quality nutrition, using fresh product, using British product, and a good understanding of how food should be procured. What it doesn't understand is the cost inhibitors that sit within cost sector. And, I'm always amazed at how we manage within public sector catering on the very low income that we have to provide food. And so much of this is done really by the skills of the caterer, and also the fact that major operators that are operating in this space are willing to do this on a margin that most operators wouldn't even contemplate. And the good thing from COVID is, for the first time ever, in my opinion, the government has recognised that hospitality is a major contributor towards the UK economy. And as someone just mentioned, they haven't recognised at this point in time that public sector is a major part of hospitality in many, many ways, whether it's from the education of children on food for a life skill and lifetime usage, the recovery of people in hospital by eating great food, MOD, it doesn't matter where you sit. And I think that we need to have a big push to actually get government to really begin to appreciate the contribution that public sector makes in the hospitality sector.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Andy. Jack.
Thank you. Really interesting comments, and I think Yeah, so I'm quite involved with the food strategy and the position of that. And I think it's really interesting listening to some of the comments, and I would absolutely urge the sector to involve itself as much as it can. And I'm happy to assist with anything I can do to help do that. It is important, but I think what's become quite apparent to me, and this was kind of proven through as we sort of got into COVID, that sort of both government and indeed some of the food strategy team weren't necessarily aware of both the scope. So we're certainly aware of retail and certainly commercial food service, but neither aware of the scope, but indeed the scale of the food system. And I think that's been one of my challenges when we talk to government and the food strategy. Look, the UK needs to produce the equivalent of 11 million loaves of white bread a day just to feed us. And it's anything we can do to sort of paint the picture of feeding the masses as opposed to sort of getting into more of the niche areas, I think is really, really important. And I think there's a huge opportunity to upsell the value that public sector catering is delivering to that. On most days I'll be using public sector catering. Either or both of our kids will be going to school and having a school meal, because luckily we're two parents that are working full time. We're not cash poor, but my goodness, we are time poor. And anything that can save us half an hour in the evening we will grab it. And I just think there's the conversation is far too weighted in policy terms on the cost as opposed to the value of society. So and I think we should be using the food strategies to catalyse that as well, because there is immense public good in there as well. The Marcus Rashford campaign got Henry into that space. I just hope he kind of stays in that for the long term and doesn't feel the heat of getting involved in social policy rather than food policy. For that's clearly a very political space. But no, I strongly urge the sector to involve itself both directly for ourselves or indeed through the Food and Drink Sector Council as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Sean, perhaps I can bring you in. Is it your impression that food service has sort of passed a little bit under the radar as far as the National Food Strategy is concerned? And if so, is it too late to get involved?
Well, yes, it is. And no, it's never too late. And I think we have a big responsibility on the back of us all doing what we've done for many years in continuing to deliver services to the highest quality possible when the price point is very, very challenged, as was mentioned earlier. We have a responsibility as an industry to come together to make sure government understands us. And I think at the moment we do that in several ways, and we're not all necessarily as joined up as we should be. And I think that's our responsibility. Lots of engagement has been had with government throughout COVID, and it's listened probably more than I've ever known it listen in the past. But I think we now need to use this as a platform to come together with other industry bodies to make sure, as I said in the chat, we really do punch our weight, because I think we've been seen for the value that we provide, and probably much more important than that, our great people have been recognised for the great services they provide, often in very difficult circumstances. So I think the theme here is we need to get our heads around quickly how, as an industry, we connect with government so that they can understand us better. But it's never too late.
Good, excellent, thank you. Kath, you've just sort of dropped a comment into the chat there about portraying the food and wider benefits that public sector catering brings to the economy. Any thoughts about how we might go about doing that?
It feels to me that that we're all fighting our own corners in this, aren't we? And we've got our passions about particular things that need to happen. And some of the success of UK hospitality, for example, and Kate Nichols in just stepping up on behalf of the entire industry to get furlough money in and to get the to help out whatever one thinks of the scheme, large amounts of cash to come back into the sector. I think we could learn something from that. And it's something about telling the story of I'm going to say our sector. I started in public sector catering, so I always feel like I'm coming home when I come to these events. But about portraying how many meals, there's the kind of the numerical side of it, the value in terms to the supply chain and to the British farmers, but also the more than a meal stuff about the other values. Because I always think public sector catering is not just about the food, even though the food is the bit I care about the most. It's about the welfare checks that come with the Meals on Wheels. It's about the educational opportunities with the school meals. It's about the introducing people to good healthy eating in whatever context they're in, and it's in the context of some form of caring profession, whether it's a prison, a school, or a Meals on Wheels service. So us speaking up as a set of people about that and being much more pushy about the value of that and how underfunded it is and how that's not being supported properly, but as a frontline delivery service. This is real frontline stuff, just as the NHS is. And there's been, sadly, somebody's grabbed the name I was going to invent, and then somebody got it, but which is the National Food Service, which is to raise the status of this work, to say this is about people's arteries and mental well-being and their educational possibilities in the future and the helping hand out of destitution and all the sort of emotive stuff. I mean, you can tell I use a lot of emotive from the way I operate, but I think there is a thing about bringing some passion to this and beating some doors down to say, we've not had the attention that is needed, and we are feeding the people who need it absolutely the most. And why on earth did things like free school meal vouchers go to supermarkets when it could have been fed into via local authorities and schools into feeding hungry kids through services that needed to extend beyond COVID? That's because people didn't understand. You're absolutely right. This, when I would describe as habit of not having talked to the food service industry, when I mean by habit, it's also a mental rut of not understanding the value of this sector and what services it provides beyond just the meals. So I think we need to tell that story in every way we possibly can, and also say, why aren't we in those committees and groups that are making these decisions? And then shaping up some specific asks that we can put to people like Henry Dimbleby, who is being very open and is very sympathetic to all of this, not forgetting that he worked on the school food standards and actually was very, very in very listening mode, very cooperative. And he, as I say, he's got a good team, but also reminding ourselves that they don't have any power because he's an advisory body. So we also need to get political about going after the white papers, after the comprehensive spending review moments, those times when the sector gets overlooked. It needs to stop being overlooked.
Okay, thank you. That's given us some sort of some practical points to chew over there. Stephen, you had something to say?
Yeah, I attended the APPG last week on National Food Strategy, and there was a huge focus there on food quality, and as you'd imagine, sort of there was some of the lords from the upper house were getting quite excited about food quality and the impact on farming and all of those things. And I think that was brilliant, that it's creating that kind of focus and looking for assurances from government that as a result of Brexit we're not going to see a diminution of food standards, and I think that was all really positive. Part one is looking very promising in terms of sort of extending school food to free school meal children. And I think that if we look at it in greater context, it's about the levelling up agenda, it's about investing in human capital in terms of children and sort of the bringing them forward. And that again has got that huge impact in terms of public sector catering, because it's saying that actually food is a route to improving people's well-being. And I just wanted to bring people's attention to the fact that at the moment there's a consultation document out there from government, which is around advertising on non-healthy foods. It's due in on the 22nd of December. So if anybody's got anything that they would like to contribute to that, if you're not doing it on sort of behalf of your own organisations, drop me a note and we'll make sure that we represent your views in terms of our feedback to that. We welcome this sort of limits on advertising on sort of non-healthy foods, because it starts to level the playing field a little bit, if you like, for our sector that's got very regulated provision. I don't know whether you've seen that, the adverts that a certain chain is doing this Christmas for a double big version of what their product is, but it's got 4 burger patties in it. And then you've got the advert from another company that is pouring gravy until it's running off the table over one of their products. I mean, they're revolting adverts, but it's capturing the mind, and it's sort of, it's really setting itself against all that we try to do in our sector about doing things right and healthily. And I think that sort of we extend that, you know, I could see Sean nodding there. You know, if you look at sort of workplace catering and all of the things that we do in the wider provided food service sector, we are all about health and well-being and environment. And yet a lot of that advertising sort of flies in the face of all that we try to do. So if you've got anything that you want to add, Lisa is responding. So send me your notes on that, and we'll add it into ours and make sure that we sort of share the campaign.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, rather belatedly, we've been joined by video with by Molly from PACE. Molly, welcome. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, but I think is very relevant to the part that you play in PACE is training and bringing forward the next generation of workers in hospitality and catering. I just wonder to what extent you have any concerns about how the last year might have been putting people off getting involved in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry for being late, everybody. College systems and IT and Zoom don't go well together. But yeah, it's been a difficult year for students. I think it's because one of the biggest things we've got to do is obviously a practical side as well as the theory, and obviously a lot of work placements, so they get that understanding of industry. And at the moment, obviously, as you can see, everybody's furloughed, or a lot of businesses are in tier 2, tier 3, so that's reduced that. So we took a more emphasis this year. I think all colleges did that. More practical was done in-house to get that work experience up, so they can get them up and running. But the problem we have is government have classed all college restaurants as part of the tier and hospitality criteria. And because we're a working restaurant, that is that they are closed on lockdown and they're going to the tier 2, tier 3 system, what there is. What, like I said this week, I know a lot of you have supported us and sent off to Boris Johnson, was a letter to say that we are actually taken out of that criteria and allow the students to be able, because they're missing out the work experience within industry, that we as providers can offer a more experience on-hand delivery, and that they are allowed to deliver a service to in-house to students and just not the general public. We never asked for that, and it was just the staff based within the industry, because now the students have lost out on that criteria and all they're doing is takeaways. So I think what we're, as numbers, and obviously we'll have that data each year, numbers on our industry for travel and tourism and hospitality, numbers are going down dramatically. And even yesterday spoke to 2 big colleges that management are asking for a restructure and looking at the potential of where hospitality is going to be, because they're saying we're inefficient at the moment. Well, yes, we are inefficient at the moment because of what's happening, and it's out of our control. And you as a parent, would you want your child to go into an industry where, because a lot of them only see hospitality as a restaurant and a pub? And where I was speaking yesterday, I've been passing around to a lot of the colleges about the hospitals, the care homes. It's a massive demand. Even universities, I know at the moment it's what's happening at the moment, but that will up and run in the next year or so. And we need to have these students and the youth of today ready to hit and run that industry. And at the moment, they're not going to be it.
Okay, thank you very much. I did want to mention we've got about another 10-15 minutes or so of this webinar to go, about the 20% less but better meat campaign. We launched it as a sort of a public sector collaborative approach earlier in the year. Had a sort of a bit of a wrap up about the progress that we've made. Andy Jones, I mean, not everyone joining us here today was available and present at that webinar we had. Could you just give us a little bit of a summary of where we are and what happens next on that?
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for supporting it. You know, we were here 12 months ago discussing it, and we put it together. We launched it, and it was really successful. It allowed us to engage with the NFU, and we're still having those engagements in a positive vein, I must say. So thank you for that. I think now what we've said at the webinar is we'll now move into the next phase, and that is around evidencing the carbon that we use, working with our suppliers and caterers, bringing them involved, looking at sustainability aspect of it. So now we're moving into the second phase, which will impact and require your input of everybody. And we're going to develop a carbon calculator with the universities. And really, we're going to drill that down so it becomes a case study for us, and we can evidence it to the government. And that will also allow us, from what we've talked about, to really show the strongness of our industry, of this public sector catering. And it will allow government to listen, and we'll be able to absolutely say, when they tell us that our data says X, we'll be able to say, well, actually, you're wrong. The data is Y. This is the evidence that we're using at the moment from the great work our suppliers are doing as well, and our caterers out there. It'll also pick up on food waste as well, which again links into all the food reviews. And I can see Phil smiling there because it's a key recommendation within the food review Phil's led. And I think, you know, food waste, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to stop hiding. We have got food waste. It's a part of our industry, but it's how we deal with that and how we reduce it. So I'm really excited as we move to phase 2, and it can only happen with everybody around this table and the wider supply chain and the wider caterers as well. So that's where we're going to, David.
Right, thank you very much for that. One of the, as Andy says, the sort of the step forward is to start using measurement of CO2 emissions as a way of being able to benchmark where perhaps menus were and where they become after 20% less meat. And I wonder, Tess at Quorn, coming out of the discussion that we had about specifically about the campaign, there was some questions raised about the sort of the carbon footprint of the meat-free substitutes, which perhaps you've got some thoughts on.
Sure, absolutely. And yeah, I've just been listening to all of the conversation with great interest. We're obviously, battling waves of several crises at the moment, Brexit, COVID-19, hunger, the ongoing obesity crisis. But, if we're facing those waves, we're certainly facing an absolute tsunami of a challenge for the food industry when it comes to climate, and particularly emissions from the food sector and the risk that poses to our food security and quality. So, really supportive of this campaign and both sides of the messages around the campaign in terms of less and better meat. To your question on carbon footprinting, this is something that we've been doing for over a decade now here at Quorn Foods. Earlier in the year, as you'll know, we have decided to go on pack with our carbon footprint of all of our products, because again, this is an area where consumers are really not equipped with a lot of knowledge around what a carbon footprint entails. It's traditionally been quite a challenging measure to achieve. So Tesco, as you know, is a famous example, wanted to do this across all of their products and actually pulled out after a few years of trying because the measures were not there. And I'm really pleased to say that now there's much better standardization. There's a lot better accessibility to the sorts of databases that we really need to make really evidence-based and fair comparisons between food groups as well. So I think the work of this group actually taking that as a positive challenge and working with academics to produce a database that we can all agree on and present, as Andy said, to the government with a lot of confidence in terms of the real positive changes that we can make across all food groups is really, really exciting. I think it's still going to be challenging because production methods vary, of course, across food groups, and we have to make sure that we are comparing foods fairly across categories as well. So you wouldn't want to be comparing a sausage to an apple that was grown here in the UK, for example. So I think there's a real message of balance in terms of making sure that we're encouraging healthy choices as well as sustainable choices.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious that one or two people haven't spoken yet. One is Phil Rees-Jones, and Phil, if you're there, my apologies, I'd have come to you, but I can't see you on my screen and haven't done for a little while. Phil Rees-Jones, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I'm having issues with my webcam at the moment.
Ah, okay, that possibly explains it. I'm sorry, Phil, I didn't see you, but I mean, you've obviously been able to follow the conversation we've had so far.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting hour and a bit of my time. Especially interested in people's views about, where the industry is going as a whole. I completely resonate with the comments that have been made about the public sector not being recognised as part of the hospitality sector. I'm not sure who made that, but I think that was such a strong point. I've written it down in caps lock as one of our colleagues did in the chat. So no, it's been really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Mark Taylor. So Mark, is there any of the points that we've been discussing so far that you'd like to make a contribution to?
I just think the chat's been really interesting, and obviously the speakers have been really great too. And I think it just comes back to that point that hospitality industry is such a wide-reaching sector that we can't let it just be focused on the ones that are being focused on in the media, because as I put in the chat, we're such a big employer, and it's not just about food. It is about the mental health. It's about the welfare check. And I really think if we could somehow get together to form the same sort of power behind us as a group as the pub, hotels and restaurant sector had, then there is a massive voice to go out there and say that it's not just about the high street. There is this huge, and I think that I just want to say one thing. I think there's an assumption that in schools and hospitals and care homes, prisons and the army, we just get on and deal with it. We just get on and deal with it. We don't kick off about it. But actually that isn't the right approach. There's a lot of people that need the public sector. I mean, imagine if a school didn't feed their children because there was a problem.
Let them do it.
So it's about collaborating, I think, and getting together.
Excellent, thank you. Dominique, you've been following the discussion so far. Is there any particular point that you'd like to make?
I think picking up on Kath's comment about COP26 and making sure that the public sector has a presence there would be very valuable. And I think also the role that the supply chain has in the education of people in terms of nutrition and how that can be integrated better through shorter supply chains, working with British producers, and how we can involve them more in the education system, actually working with them to showcase the standards that they're farming to, and what they're doing to produce the food that is then eaten in the schools, particularly would be schools and universities. I think would be a really interesting area for that to happen. And just also to say, if there's any kind of success stories that people have on this call to share with me around what public sector is doing already on this front, I'd be really interested to hear that.
Okay, thank you for that. Jack, we were talking just now about the 20% less but better meat campaign. You obviously had Stuart at the event itself to sort of bat for your corner, but broadly, do you feel that sort of the farming community understands where the food service sector is coming from in terms of this isn't sort of about criticising meat consumption or demonising meat in any way? It's about sort of managing carbon footprint, but more importantly, following the trends and tastes of consumers right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's no escaping for it. I think it's the from my perspective, I'm not necessarily interested in the 20% less. I'm interested in the better bit, because that's where I think we've got a real strong story to tell on. Let's talk about British beef. The data tells us that UK produced beef has half the carbon footprint of the global average, and that's incredibly powerful. So we need to make sure we've got all the information, all the data, to make sure that people can make informed informed choices at the end of the day. So, and I think it's, this has brought us together actually, and I think that's incredibly powerful thing to do. So certainly the focus on the better bit for me, I think, is the powerful bit, and to contribute to that, balancing the need. I do, after sort of learning more and more about public sector procurement, I do fear that price has too much of a place in what's going on, as opposed to the other attributes, whether that's nutrition, whether that's sustainability, and whether that's contribution to broader society. So so it's a great discussion to be involved with, and it's one that we can't just stick our fingers in our ears and ignore, is it really?
Okay, thank you. Now the chat's been alive for the last sort of few minutes with the thought of getting involved with the COP26 conference on climate change in Glasgow, which obviously happens next year. Lindsay and Kath are both sort of commented with some particular ideas on how that might be used by the food service sector. Lindsay, what's your thoughts on this?
I just think when the eyes of the world are on the UK, the world leaders are going to be there, and we're going to be in the COVID recovery phase, and all the stuff that we've been talking about today. We actually need to do something very practical and demonstrate, the value of public sector food. And one way to do that in a very public way and a very global way would be at COP26. So for me, whether that's having a stand or having some kind of fringe event that goes on for a day and an evening and a dinner or something like that. I mean, for goodness sake, if we don't know about putting on a bit of food and welcome to folk, who does? So it would be a good way actually to engage with people over a meal, even, all sustainably procured from our good farmers and folk, and say, come and have a meal with us, talk to us about public sector food, and invite the public along to stands. And it just seems a perfect opportunity.
Okay, Kathy.
Sorry, Kath or Kathy? Do you want?
Kath.
Oh, yeah, just because I've been involved with conversations with Nourish Scotland for the last year about COP26, because obviously it would have been happening round about now, or had just have finished had it not been for COVID. So there's a fantastic initiative called the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration that Nourish has been coordinated to try and get several cities, big cities, to sign up to saying we're going to use our procurement, we're going to use our land, we're going to use our waste strategy, to tackle climate change through food. And I would really welcome engagement of the organisations on this call with that process, because as Lindsay just said, I think public sector catering is one of the key delivery routes, because local authorities have some relationship with that, and also government can make policies on it, but also it would be driving change within the private sector as well, who will be very present at COP26. And so the other thing is that we have been asked to have some stands and do fringe events, and Nourish Scotland is arranging something involving lots of farmers coming from all over the world to talk about agroecology, which is a general term for better forms of farming that are climate friendly. It's a sort of generic catch-all term, but to talk about the less and better meat agenda, to talk about the waste agenda, to talk about making sure that contracts actually favour farmers and are sympathetic to seasonal variations, pay fairly, pay on time, all of those things that actually make a fair supply chain that makes sustainable farming work as well. So really welcome people's involvement in that, and Nourish Scotland are doing a fantastic job at raising that up the agenda. So one more thing, and then I'll shut up, I promise, is that we've been reviewing local authority climate declarations. So everybody around the country has been whipping up local authorities and councils to make a climate declaration, and we've just reviewed all of them, and a tiny proportion of them even mention food. And of course that's something we now want to fix, and my colleague Ruth Westcott has been working on a toolkit saying you can do stuff on procurement, you can do stuff on land use, you can do stuff on horticulture, and all those kind of things. So again, people's involvement in that would be very welcome. I'm happy to share around draft versions of that, and that's very much an evolving thing, as Andy Jones has rightly said. We need to be learning as we go along, and and working out the tools we can share between each other. But I think having things that can drive the pace of change and show tangible results is where we're all at now, isn't it? We're trying to and showing that the public sector is a huge part of delivering on a fairer, better food system that's also climate friendly is absolutely the thing we should be doing for our era, really.
Okay, thank you for that. We are pretty much out of time now, but so I would like to sort of leave the last word with Andy Jones, chair of the PSC 100 group. Andy, have you got any sort of thoughts about how this COP26 conference in Glasgow might provide a platform for public sector catering?
I think it's quite interesting event that we should be at. I think, you know, taking a stand, I take Lindsay's point about, you know, this could be our opportunity to showcase the great food that we do in our sector, but also to really embed what we've discussed during this hour and a half, which is flown by. You know, let's raise our flag, let's tell them we're here, and let's show them, you know, we will have evidence by then. You know, one thing's come out of the pandemic, it's delayed it by a year. I do think we should be there. I think we probably need to start discussing it now, what our theme and topics are going to be, how we deliver it, because there is, let's face it, we've all got a broad range of what we want to discuss, but I think for anything like this, we've got to be concise, we've got to package it correctly, and we've got to deliver it correctly. But we've got so many passionate people within our industry, and I think we need to harness that passion. Let's get a trade stand, let's get up there, and let's get, you know, whatever we can do. I've been to fringe events with the RCN, and the fringe events are usually earned more than the main arena. So, you know, we could actually have a fringe event around public sector catering and showcase everything that we do, from NHS to prisons to the MOD to the care sector to the universities to the schools. We could really go there and use it as a platform for people from Molly's sector in PACE to come and want to work in our industry. Because as my opening words were, I really do feel that people may be put off coming to put into our work in our industry because they're looking at that word hospitality and not the public sector catering.
Okay, thanks, Andy. As I've strongly suspected, the time's flown by. We haven't been able to talk about absolutely everything we wanted to. We haven't been able to explore what we did talk about in all of the detail maybe that we would have liked ideally, but unfortunately that's all we have time for today. So thank you all very much for your contributions. I hope this has managed to sort of lay a platform that you in public sector catering can use to build on in 2021, perhaps revisiting some of the areas that need more discussion, developing ideas and acting where necessary.
Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the discussions. Congratulations to all those on the public sector most influential list in 2020. And once again, thank you to our partners who make the events possible. Goodbye.